Millions of people, all across the globe, turn their hearts to Saint Rita of Cascia when every other light has gone out. They call upon her when the doctor delivers the news that no one wants to hear, when a marriage is so shattered that no human hands could ever piece it back together. They seek her out when the door is slammed shut for the third time, and there simply isn't another door left to knock on. They turn to her, not to another saint, not to just any popular devotion, but specifically to her. Think about that for a moment. We are talking about a 15th century Augustinian nun who lived in a tiny remote village in the Apennine Mountains, a place so small that most people today couldn't even find it on a map. But why? Is this just some empty, hollow tradition? Is it nothing more than a religious superstition passed down through the generations? Is it just a habit we repeat without ever asking where it came from? The answer is a resounding no. There is a reason, a profound theological, historical, and spiritual reason why the Church associates this one woman with the cases that have no human solution. And that reason is rooted in something that happened in her own life, not just once, but over and over and over again. Her life was the living proof that for God, the word impossible does not exist. That is exactly what we are going to explore today. But before we go any deeper into this mystery, I want to share something with you that has our entire team incredibly excited. We are currently in the middle of a massive project, a true super production about the complete life of Saint Rita. We are covering the entire story, from her birth in Roccaporena to the agony of the Holy Thorn, from her difficult marriage to the silence of the convent. It will have the same depth and quality you've come to expect from our channel. This special feature will premiere on May 22nd, her feast day, and we need your help to make sure this story reaches as many souls as possible. If you want to see that video, if you want us to produce it with all the honor and detail she deserves, I need you to do one simple thing. Go to the comments right now and write, "I want to see it." It's that simple. Each comment tells the YouTube algorithm that this content matters. It tells us that you are there, waiting, and that this mission is worth it. So, pause for a second. Scroll down, type "I want to see it," and then come right back. I'll be waiting for you. Now, let's get back to the heart of the matter. Why is Saint Rita known as the patroness of impossible causes? To understand this, we first have to understand what the Church actually means when it declares someone a patron of something. It isn't magic. It's not a lucky charm that you rub to get what you want. It isn't a coin you drop into a vending machine to buy a miracle. It is intercession. It is the prayer of a soul who stands directly before the throne of God, speaking on behalf of those of us still struggling here on earth. Think of it like asking a very close friend to pray for you, but with one massive difference. A friend on earth might forget, but a saint never forgets. They are in the presence of the Almighty permanently, and they pray for you with an efficacy that the distance between heaven and earth cannot diminish. But why was Rita, out of all the saints in history, specifically chosen for the impossible? Because her life was a literal chain of impossibilities, not just one or two, but an entire sequence of situations that had absolutely no way out. And yet, one by one, every single one of them found a resolution through the direct intervention of God. As a young girl, all she wanted was to be a religious sister, but her family forced her into a marriage with a violent man. That was impossible, number one. She desperately wanted peace in her home, but her husband was brutal, aggressive, and feared by everyone in the village. Impossible, number two. She prayed for 18 years for her husband's conversion, and then the man changed. He was transformed. He repented, right before he was murdered in a local blood feud. The impossible became possible, but the price was devastating. She wanted to save her sons from the cycle of revenge. But both young men swore they would avenge their father's death. Rita, in an act of faith that would make most of us tremble, asked God to take her sons before they could commit a mortal sin. Shortly after, both boys died of illness. God heard her prayer, but the cost was beyond words. Now she was a widow. She had lost her children. She was completely alone in the world. She asked to enter the Augustinian convent in Cascia. They told her no. She asked again. They said no. She asked a third time. They said no. And then God said yes. Every single impossible wall was torn down, not by human effort, not by luck, and certainly not by coincidence. It was done through perseverance in prayer. Popular devotion isn't random. The faithful didn't pick Rita by chance. They looked at the evidence of her life and reached a conclusion that carries the weight of truth. If God did the impossible so many times for her, He can do it for us. Of all the impossibles in Rita's life, there is one that we need to stop and look at very closely, because it is the one that looks the most like what millions of people are suffering through right now. 18 years. Think about that number. She prayed for 18 years for the conversion of a violent husband, not 18 days, not 18 months, 18 years. That is 6,570 nights of sleeping next to a man who strikes you. That is 6,570 mornings of waking up and choosing not to run away. That is 6,570 days of praying for someone who doesn't show the slightest sign of changing. How many of us would have lasted a single year, 2, 5? Rita endured for 18, not because she was a masochist, not because she enjoyed the pain, and certainly not because she had no other choice. She did have a choice. She could have moved back to her parents' house. She could have abandoned him. She could have simply given up on his soul, but she didn't. She stayed because she possessed something most of us lack: the absolute certainty that prayer works, even when it hasn't worked yet. The key word there is yet. Prayer is not a vending machine. You don't just put in a coin and get a result. Prayer is a seed. You plant it, you water it, and then you wait. And sometimes, many times, the wait lasts for years. It lasts so long that you start to wonder if the seed is dead. You wonder if the soil is barren. You wonder if God is even listening, or if you are just talking to a brick wall. For 18 years, Rita likely felt like she was talking to a wall. And then, the wall crumbled. Her husband changed. We don't know the exact details of how it happened. The historical records don't give us the how. We only know the result. Paul Mancini, the violent man who terrified his own family, finally repented. He asked for forgiveness. He reconciled with Rita. He converted. And shortly after, he was killed in an ambush. Paul's conversion is the first of Rita's great impossibles, and it is the one that speaks with the most power to those who have been praying for years without seeing any results, to the parent praying for the child who left the faith, to the wife praying for the husband who wants nothing to do with God, to the person praying for a family member lost in the darkness of addiction. Rita says to you today, I prayed for 18 years. Do not stop. The seed is not dead. The soil is not barren. God hears you, even if He doesn't respond on your timeline. He responds when He wills it, and His clock is not yours. We also have to look at the 3 rejections from the convent. This episode, perhaps more than any other, explains why she is the patroness of impossible causes. After losing everything, her husband, her children, her entire future, Rita wanted to fulfill the dream she had since childhood, to give herself entirely to God in the religious life. She went to the Augustinian convent of St. Mary Magdalene in Cascia and asked to be admitted. The answer was no. The reasons were actually quite logical. Rita was a widow, but she wasn't just any widow. She was the widow of a man murdered in a high-profile blood feud. If the nuns allowed her in, they feared they would be bringing that vendetta inside the convent walls. They didn't want the trouble. They didn't want the risk. The Mother Superior's response was prudent, it was reasonable, it was sensible, and it was wrong. But Rita didn't give up. She went back, she asked again. The answer was the same. A cold, resounding no. She returned a third time, again. She was rejected. 3 times. In the world of men, 3 strikes mean you are out. But in the kingdom of heaven, the number 3 is not a coincidence. It is the sacred threshold of perseverance. Think of the Holy Scriptures. Peter denies his Lord 3 times, and 3 times the risen Christ asks, "Do you love me?" restoring his soul. Paul pleads with the Lord 3 times to remove the thorn from his flesh, and God answers, "My grace is sufficient for you." Even Jesus, in the agonizing darkness of Gethsemane, prays 3 times before fully embracing the weight of the cross. 3 is not a magic number. It is the dividing line, the wall that separates those who surrender from those who prevail. Rita did not surrender. She prevailed. And then something happened that the nuns could never explain through human logic. One night, tradition tells us that her 3 celestial protectors, St. John the Baptist, St. Augustine, and St. Nicholas of Tolentino, descended to her aid. Suddenly, Rita was inside the convent, inside the strict enclosure of the cloister, without a single bolt being drawn, without a single door being opened, without an invitation from any human hand. She was simply there, at the breaking of dawn, standing within the very walls that had 3 times shut her out. The nuns found her in deep prayer. At that moment, they realized a terrifying and beautiful truth. They were not the ones who decided who entered those gates. God was the one who decided. Rita was finally admitted. She was roughly 36 years old. She would spend the next 40 years within those stone walls, praying, serving, suffering, and interceding, until she became the saint the entire world invokes when every door has been slammed shut. The lesson here is as clear as it is uncomfortable. The door of God does not operate like the doors of this world. The door of the world closes when they tell you no, but the door of God, that door opens when you insist. Persistent prayer is not impertinence. It is radical faith, the faith that returns a 3rd time, even after the world has mocked your hope, is the faith that moves mountains. Rita proved this with her very life, and every person today who kneels to Saint Rita when they have reached a dead end is repeating, perhaps without even knowing it, the defiant act of that widow who returned to the convent one last time. But there is a moment in Rita's life that reveals a much deeper, more unsettling side of her spirituality. It explains why her intercession carries such staggering power. In the year 1432, while listening to a sermon on the Passion of Christ, Rita felt a fire ignited in her soul. The preacher described the crowning with thorns with such visceral intensity that Rita felt a desire most of us would be too afraid to even whisper. She did not ask for comfort. She did not ask for peace. She did not ask for relief. She asked for pain. She begged to share in the physical agony of Christ on the cross, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual exercise, but as a real, concrete, and crushing experience. And Christ heard her. A single thorn from the crown of thorns flew from the crucifix and pierced her forehead. It wasn't a vision, it was flesh and blood. The wound opened, and it never closed. For 15 years, it suppurated. It carried a foul odor. It was so repulsive, so ghastly, that her fellow sisters had to stay away from her. Rita was isolated, not as a punishment, but because the physical reality of her wound made community life impossible. She lived the final 15 years of her life with a stigma that was anything but glorious. It wasn't the luminous wounds of St. Francis of Assisi. It wasn't the periodic stigmata of St. Gemma Galgani. It was a thorn, small, constant, putrid, and humiliating. And here lies the secret key that connects Rita's thorn to her title as the patroness of impossible causes. A thorn is not a grand wound. It isn't the massive nail through the hand that everyone sees and pities. A thorn is the small wound, the one no one notices, the one that doesn't seem important enough for compassion, yet it stings every second of every minute of every hour for 15 long years. Rita's thorn represents the chronic sickness that doesn't kill you but won't let you live. It represents the marriage that isn't broken but won't heal. It is the grief that never fades, the loneliness that has no cure, the dead-end job that exhausts your soul without giving it meaning. It is the everyday pain, the pain that has no name, no diagnosis, the pain that doesn't feel holy enough for a prayer card. Rita carried that thorn for 15 years, not as a burden, but as an offering. Every sharp sting was a communion with Christ. Every moment of isolation was a prayer rising directly to the heart of a God who was also despised, also cast aside, and who also suffered in a silence that the world refused to see. This is why Rita is the patroness of the impossible, not because she performs magic, but because she knows pain. She knows it from the inside, from the thorn to the bone. When a suffering soul cries out to her, Rita does not intercede from a place of heavenly comfort. She intercedes from the vivid memory of a suffering that marked her forever. Now, there is something we must clarify, because the gap between popular devotion and the official laws of the Church often causes confusion. Saint Rita died in 1457. The people recognized her holiness immediately. Miracles began to erupt at her tomb. Roses became her signature. Bees, which tradition says swarmed her cradle as an infant without ever stinging her, became her emblem. The devotion grew like a raging river that no one could contain. Yet, her official canonization did not happen until the year 1900. More than 400 years after her death. Why did it take so long? Because the Church is not in a hurry. And it shouldn't be. The process of canonization exists to separate true holiness from passing emotion. It demands verified miracles, not just pious stories, but medical healings documented and declared scientifically inexplicable. It demands testimonies under oath. It demands a brutal theological autopsy of the candidate's life. It is a long, rigorous, and often frustrating journey for the faithful who already know what the Church is still verifying. Rita was beatified in 1627 by Pope Urban VIII, 170 years after her death. She was finally canonized in 1900 by Pope Leo XIII, another 273 years later. Total time, 443 years between her last breath and her official title, nearly half a millennium. Does this mean the people were wrong to pray to her before 1900? Absolutely not. It means that popular devotion and official liturgy are two lungs of the same body. Popular devotion is the scent of the faithful, the instinct that recognizes a saint long before the paperwork is signed. The official cult is the guarantee of the Church, the seal that says, we have examined this life with the utmost gravity, and we confirm what you already knew. Both are legitimate. Both are necessary. Devotion without the Church can turn into superstition, but the Church without devotion can turn into bureaucracy. Rita lives in both worlds, because authentic holiness never has to choose between the heart of the people and the authority of the Church. Her feast is celebrated on May 22nd. On that day, in Catholic churches across the globe, roses are blessed, in memory of the single rose that miraculously bloomed in the dead of winter, when Rita, lying on her deathbed, asked for a sign that her impossible life had finally found its home in God. In some traditions, especially in Italy and throughout the Americas, blessed fava beans are distributed to the faithful, a humble food of the earth, sanctified by a blessing. Much like everything Rita touched in her life, ordinary on the outside, but divine on the inside. But there is a fundamental question we must answer, a question that does not only affect our devotion to Saint Rita, but our entire relationship as Catholics with the saints. And it is this: what does it actually mean to ask a saint to intercede for us? It is not worship. We worship God alone. The saints are not minor deities, nor are they pagan demigods with powers of their own. They are our brothers and sisters, elder siblings who have completed the race, who stand before the face of God, and from that heavenly vantage point, they do exactly what they did while they were alive. They pray for others. When you ask a dear friend to pray for you, no one calls it idolatry. No one accuses you of putting your friend in the place of God. You are simply asking for help, the help of their prayer, the strength of their intercession. The saints do the very same thing, but they possess an advantage that the living do not. They are standing in the direct presence of the Almighty. They are free from the distractions of this earthly life. They know no fatigue. They never forget a request. They intercede permanently, mirroring Christ himself, who, as the letter to the Hebrews tells us, always lives to make intercession for us. Rita is the perfect example of this intercession, because in her life, she was an intercessor long before she was ever declared a saint. She interceded for her violent husband, Paul, during 18 long years of silent, agonizing prayer, and that man was finally converted. She interceded for her sons, asking the unthinkable, that God would take them to himself before they could fall into the trap of a mortal sin. She interceded for the sisters in her convent, for the sick who sought her out, for the sinners who begged for her prayers. Rita did not begin interceding only after she died. She began while she still breathed. Death simply set her free to do what she had always done. But now, without the limitations of time, of space, or of a frail mortal body, when you pray to Saint Rita, you are not replacing God. You are asking someone who knows the jagged path of suffering, someone who knows the stinging thorn, the grief of widowhood, the agony of loss, and the weight of closed doors, to walk with you toward the throne of grace and say, "Lord, this child of yours is suffering. I know what it is to suffer. Please, listen to them." And here, it is worth pausing to speak of something practical, because devotion without practice is merely emotion, and emotion without practice eventually evaporates. How exactly does one pray to Saint Rita? There is no single way, but tradition has preserved certain forms that have borne fruit for centuries. The most well-known is the novena to Saint Rita, 9 days of focused prayer leading up to her feast day, from May 13th to the 21st. 9 days that trace the great milestones of her life, her marriage, the conversion of Paul, the loss of her children, the 3 refusals, the miracle of the holy thorn, and on each of those days, we ask for a specific grace through her intercession. This novena is not a hollow ritual, it is a journey. It mirrors the 9 months of gestation, the 9 choirs of angels, the 9 first Fridays requested by the Sacred Heart. In the Christian tradition, 9 is the number of fruitful waiting. But you do not need to wait until May. You can pray to Saint Rita any day of the year, particularly on Thursdays, the day tradition associates with her because of her deep connection to the Passion. It was a Thursday when Jesus instituted the Eucharist and sweat blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. You can pray with your own words, for the simplest words are always the most powerful. You can pray by simply whispering, "Saint Rita, you who understand the impossible, please speak to God for me." And there is a gesture that summarizes the heart of this devotion better than any formal prayer. Bringing a rose to the church and placing it at her feet. The rose is Rita's signature. The rose that bloomed in the dead of January. The rose that defied the seasons. the rose that says without a single word what faith says with all the words in the world. The impossible blooms when God wills it. Why pray to Saint Rita today? Because the world remains crowded with impossibilities. The medical diagnosis that says there is no cure. The son or daughter who has wandered far from the faith, and there seems to be no human way to bring them back. The marriage that has been broken on the inside for years, even if the outside looks intact. The addiction that resurfaces every time you think it has been conquered. The debt that keeps growing. The job that vanishes. The loneliness that settles in like a tenant who refuses to pay rent and refuses to leave. There is the woman praying for a husband who will not change, just as Rita prayed for 18 years. There is the father who has knocked on every door to save his child from drugs, only to find them all locked, just as Rita knocked 3 times on the convent door. There is the patient carrying a chronic pain that no one else sees and no one understands, just as Rita carried the holy thorn for 15 years. Every one of those impossibles has a name. It has a face. It has a story that only the one living it truly knows. And every one of those impossibles has a saint who understands it, not from a textbook, but from her own flesh. Because Rita lived it all. The destroyed marriage, the domestic violence, the loss of her children, the institutional rejection, the physical suffering without a cure. There is no human pain that Rita has not walked through. And that makes her the most credible intercessor for those who suffer what no one should have to suffer. There is a phrase often attributed to Saint Rita. Perhaps it was born from popular devotion, but it is true in the deepest sense of the word. Ask me for the impossible. She does not say this with arrogance. She says it with the authority of one who has seen God perform the impossible in her own life, over and over and over again, until the very word impossible lost all its meaning. For every one of those impossible situations, Rita has an answer that is not a magic formula, but a lived testimony. I was there too. I also knocked on doors that remained shut. I also prayed for years without seeing a single result. I also carried a thorn that no one wanted to see. And God, the same God who made a rose bloom in the freezing cold of January, did not abandon me. He did not abandon me when my husband was violent. He did not abandon me when my children died. He did not abandon me when the convent rejected me. He did not abandon me when the thorn isolated me from the world. He never abandoned me, and he is not going to abandon you. Prayer to Saint Rita is not an incantation. It is an act of faith, the faith of someone who believes that God can do what men say cannot be done. And if God could make a rose bloom in the heart of winter, he can make whatever needs to bloom in your life flourish, no matter how dead it seems, no matter how impossible it looks. Saint Rita of Cascia, patroness of impossible causes, woman of the thorn and of the rose, widow, mother, nun, intercessor for those who no longer know where to turn, pray for us. Pray for those who have knocked on every door only to find them closed. Pray for those who carry a thorn that no one sees, a thorn that hurts every single day. Pray for the broken marriages seeking healing. Pray for the parents weeping for lost children. Pray for the sick who are waiting for a miracle, and for those who have forgotten how to hope, and grant us the grace to learn from your life, a lesson far more profound than any spoken sermon could ever reach. You show us that even when the door slams shut, once, twice, 3 times, it will swing open on the 4th, provided our faith remains unyielding. Amen. And please, mark your calendars, because on May 22nd, we are bringing you the full untold story of Saint Rita of Cascia. We will walk through the rugged, humble paths of Roccaparina, all the way to the agonizing mystery of the Holy Thorn, exploring every detail with the depth and reverence this sacred journey deserves. If you don't want to miss this spiritual event, hit that subscribe button right now and click the notification bell so YouTube makes sure you are right there with us when it premieres. And if your heart is already longing for this story, scroll down right now and type "I want to see it" in the comments. Go ahead, let us know you're ready, and we will see you on the 22nd. If these words have moved your soul today, if you have felt a flicker of hope in your own struggle, I ask you for 3 small things that help us more than you know. First, click that like button, that little thumb up icon right below the image. When you do that, you aren't just clicking a button. You are telling the algorithm that this message matters, and you are helping YouTube reach others who are desperately seeking hope in the darkness. Second, share this video. Send it to a family member, a dear friend, or anyone you know who is carrying a heavy cross right now and needs Saint Rita's powerful intercession. Whether it's through a text message or social media, sometimes a single video, shared at the perfect moment, can change a person's life forever. And third, if you feel called to support our mission, look for the heart icon below that says "Thanks," the super thanks button. This allows you to make a small, completely voluntary contribution to the channel, any amount you choose. This support is what fuels our work, allowing us to spend hours researching these stories, producing high-quality videos, and carrying the light of faith into homes across the globe. It is never required, but if you are able to do so, we thank you from the very bottom of our hearts. Thank you for walking this path with us. Thank you for your time and your prayerful heart. May Saint Rita, the patroness of impossible causes, intercede for you and for those you love. We will see you on May 22nd.